I'm Dara Fitzgerald. I'm the Executive Director of the Fulbright Commission in Ireland. And today we're just giving a brief overview of the Fulbright programme, the application process, and things maybe that you might want to know if you do go forward to putting in an application. So everybody is very welcome, and thank you very much to Joe from WIT for hosting this morning. Just to know that you're our first call this year. So it's so we started with we'll start with the best and going from there. We're starting with Waterford today. So, Fulbright, really, it's probably a name you might know about. You may have even found a little bit more detail about it prior to this application, or maybe something that you know a lot about, and you know, are considering in terms of your career what you might want to do. The program was set up by William Fulbright shortly after the Second World War, and really in response to what he thought was the apparent you know, horrors that had happened during the Second World War. In his view at the time was that people did awful things to other people because they didn't understand them, they didn't know them, they thought of them as others. So that was really the basis for why he wanted to do this. How and the angle he chose through education was because of his own experience as an exchange student where he'd gone to the UK, and he learned quite a lot. So he spent some years putting together kind of trying to recoup money that was available after the Second World War from the US government and reappropriate that and start this program. His initial view was that he might get 8 countries together, and as you can see, we're now up to, it waxes and wanes a little bit, but it's typically around 180 countries. So I think that was certainly way beyond his expectation at the time. Ireland got involved in the 50s, and the program was running out of a different department. And then we were set up formally as a commission in 1991. There were 49 commissions around the world, of which Ireland has one. The rest of the programs operate out of the US embassies or offices associated with the US embassy, but the commissions are full binational programs. So what Fulbright is about and what Fulbright is looking for, we are looking for students, scholars, artists, teachers, professionals. That probably covers off most people, and we certainly like to promote that idea that many people can apply for this, and we are looking for the diversity of people from where they come from and what stage in their career they come from. We are very supportive of all disciplines. To some extent, we feel a bit agnostic actually, because we support all disciplines, we don't necessarily focus in on any one discipline. We're more focused on the person. But the people we want then to come on board are to research, or to study, or to teach, or to lecture in the USA, particularly if you're Irish going out that way. Obviously, you can be American coming to Ireland, and I'll talk about that at the very end. What the awards will give you from the top, I suppose, a monetary grant, but there's a lot of soft parts as well underneath that to try and make the experience a lot more wholesome, and that's probably some of the part that program and award, you know, allows the program to be more interactive and integrated with all the awardees. So there is visa administration, the flight accident and emergency insurance, the cultural and professional programming, that is something you will get in Ireland and in the US. And then I suppose the biggest part of it, and the part that could last for a lifetime, is the ongoing support and links to the global network of Fulbright alum, one of who, Anne Graham Cagney, is on the call today, and she will talk about that. The experience can be very much, you will hear many Fulbrighters in Ireland, the US, and globally talking about the experience of a lifetime, or transformative, or you know, it had a big impact on them at their different stages in their life and in their career. It can be a lifelong program. It's very much a Fulbright family, and you're very welcome to join and remain connected. Many do. Some don't, or some dip in and out and then come back at a later stage, but it is a lifelong program. It is very much about recognition, obviously. It's quite a prestigious program, but it's very globally recognized as well. So it's not just the prestige, but it's the fact that there are many Fulbrighters around the world in different countries, and many governments support this program. So the governments in different countries recognize the program as well. And as I said, it is very much a family. You are joining global peers. In WIT, you had some success over the years, and many of these people have continued to engage with the Fulbright program through the Alumni Association and or through interacting with the Commission, as interviewers, reviewers, helping us with roadshows and other events. So it's an ongoing engagement, and I think Anne can talk a little bit about the Alumni Association as well when she speaks. Just small details about Anne. She is a senior lecturer in WIT there. Possibly some of the people on the call would already know her. As I said, she's been a member of the Irish Alumni Association, and she is soon to be the president of the Alumni Association. So she's still very actively involved in the Fulbright program, and I'll allow her to tell you a little bit more as she comes on board. A key thing, I suppose, in any awards program is to establish your eligibility. Really, you are, the broad spectrum is that you're an Irish citizen, not always living in Ireland, but an Irish citizen. And if you're an EU citizen with 3 years more residency in Ireland, then we, uniquely among commissions in Europe, allow EU citizens who are resident for 3 or more years in Ireland to apply for the program as well. This is, I suppose, really to acknowledge the fact that we have a lot of Europeans who come and study and teach and ultimately live in Ireland. So it's to allow for that. One thing I would say, and I'm going to emphasize a few things, particularly if you really are interested in applying, is to demonstrate a strong rationale for where you're going in the US. Not really just having a name of an institution, but really understanding why you want to go there. You will at some point have to apply with the 2-year home rule for a visa requirement that only comes into effect if you subsequently decide that you want to go for longer term residency back in the US. You will have to be a resident in Ireland for 2 years before you can then apply for a longer term residency in the US. You cannot be a dual US-Irish citizen. You cannot be living in the US at the time of application. The other part would say you cannot have recent extensive experience of studying or living in the US. If you were on the West Coast some 10 years ago and you spent some time there and then you're going to the East Coast, we would consider something like that highly relevant. But if you really have some queries about that, by all means reach out to us and ask the question. What people do say about the program, and we say this to career guidance as well, so at many different stages of your career, is that there really are no downsides to applying for a Fulbright program or even equivalent to Fulbright program, because you learn a lot, you think a lot, you develop a lot. It's very personalized. It's not really about your research. It's not about the papers you're going to produce or the technology you might be going to the intellectual property that you might be generating. It's really about you and your career and where you want to go and what you want to develop. And that in itself is a very useful exercise. And many times applicants, successful and unsuccessful, do say that it's been a very rewarding and useful experience to entertained and gone through the process of the application. So when do you start the application? Well, our applications for this year will open on 31st of August. They will close on 31st of October. We will go through external reviews through from November, December, and then in late January, early February, we will be calling people for interviews, and then we'll be in a position, it has to go through Ireland and back through to the US through a number of steps there. We will then in March be able to come back to people with offers. So what can you do at this time? Well, we start, obviously this roadshow is quite early on before the 31st of March. But the reason we do that is to give people time to consider what they want to do, put anything they need in place, even if it's consider a sabbatical, or consider what institution they really want to go to, what course they want to do, what researchers are that they really want to work with, what's most relevant. The US is a big country. It really is, and it has thousands of institutions that are all equally valid in terms of you to apply to, and very often there are many of the areas that you might not have considered that are most appropriate for you. I would say sometimes you have the best experience if you can go to somewhere like Oklahoma City versus New York City. you might be recognized as a rock star, an Irish Fulbright rock star in Oklahoma City, and less recognizable in New York City. But really it is about whatever fits for you. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further down the line. So the categories that you could consider applying for are Irish Student Award. Typically that's postgraduate research, or to apply to do a postgraduate degree program in the States. An Irish Scholar, then we would say it's very much so for people who could be post-PhD, active in research, or who want to lecture, or possibly do a combination of research and lecture. The Tech Impact Awards are very specific. There are scholar awards and professional awards, but they're very much about the impact of IT. It's quite broad. It could be the impact of IT on your work, or the impact of IT that you are bringing to other people's work in the USA. We do allow quite a lot of flexibility on that, and I would say be a little bit creative in your thinking for that. They're shorter term awards. That's the other part. They're up to 3 months. But typically, we typically ask that they might be from 1 month to 3 months. And if you're an Irish language speaker, and I don't know if we have anybody on the call here, but you can teach Irish language in up to, I think there are 10 or 12 institutions in the US that we work with who host Fulbrighters to teach Irish language. So you're very much engaged in part of the program. It'd be an exceptional experience for Irish language speakers. The last award that you could possibly apply for would be Fulbright Schoon Awards. They're actually run through the Belgian Commission, and the application period is a little bit later. But this would be very much at a higher level of issues that are impact on the EU and in the US. And there's an equivalent program for Americans to come to European countries, so they can come to one or more countries in the same area. So that again is probably something worth looking at if you're thinking that you're looking at kind of higher level problems. So a little bit more detail about the student awards. It's for visiting researchers or degree seeking students. It's minimum 4 months, maximum 12 months, and the maximum award is typically around 30,000. Can be significantly less. We tend to work by the amount of time that you're going to be out there and other additional costs as they may arise. For the Scholar Awards, then, as I mentioned, it would typically be postdoctoral or professional. And again, it's worth noting that it's not in any particular discipline. We're really open to all our disciplines. It's more about the person. So if you're 5 years professional relevant experience, you can apply. So Joe and other people on this call, if you don't consider yourself an academic as a professional, you can still apply for a Fulbright award. We would ask as well that you establish your affiliation with the US institution that you want to go to. It's a minimum of 3 months and a maximum, with a maximum award again of 35,000. The Tech Impact Awards, as I mentioned, are very specific to kind of IT, ICT impact. Now we say 2 weeks to 3 months duration. Really, that's technically allowed for the 2 weeks, but our recommendation would go for at least a month to get any kind of an experience, or at least have a view for where you're going to go back again and make, continue your impact through program, because Fulbright name can really open doors for you. So I think it's, and generate a great experience for you. So I think the longer you can go, the better. And then I mentioned the Irish language. I don't know that anybody is on the call here, but it would be, we effectively place you in host institutions in the US as they apply. They're typically, they have Irish language programs as part of our overall US offer. We do a sponsored awards. Sponsored awards can be, we have a myriad of different sponsors who have a myriad of different requirements, and you must fill out a sponsored award form in your application. Put down a comment there, hint, be strategy aware and be innovative. What that means is that have a little look, if you're thinking of applying for a sponsored award, have a look at what the sponsor's focus strategy is about and see how you might fit there. It's not always cut and dry. So if you're interested in applying to Chagas, for instance, it might be that you look at agriculture or agri-food or forestry, but it may be that you're bringing some technology to that, or maybe that you're bringing your area that has an application. So a lot of these sponsors have quite a broad range of interests as well. And Enterprise Ireland will be very much about innovation and business aspects, but again, that can be much broader. So again, the comment I'm saying is be strategy aware, have a look at what they might be interested in as sponsors and see where you might fit. Sometimes it's good to stand out from the crowd as well. For example, so the awards we have an EI award, we have an Environmental Protection Agency award, a Geological Survey Ireland award, Geoscience. Again, a lot of these are broader than the terms of the actual agency, because they're interwoven really with many agencies, and the research they do is very broad. Some student-only awards. Then we have a Creative Ireland Museum fellowships, going to Harry Ransom Centre, Smithsonian, and Exploratorium. We have some LLM awards, but we have fee waivers agreed with the institutions, and the Chagas Award is a student award. Scholar Awards, then with the Health Research Health Impact Award. That is really very much aimed at healthcare professionals and researchers. The NUI Scholar Awards for early career postdoc. You have to be an NUI graduate at some level. So whether you've got your some degree at an NUI university, that's the only stipulation, the specific stipulation for that, as well as being early career postdoc. The new Fulbright Creative Ireland Scholar Fellowship, I'm not sure that applies to anybody on this call. And I mentioned the Tech Impact Award. There's also a very specific one, a Tech Impact Award in cybersecurity at Boston College. Again, a lot of this detail is available on our website. So the application requirements then are your information and CV. I think very importantly, a personal statement and your Fulbright statement. As we'll keep saying, we're very interested in you as a person. That's really who we want to find out about. Obviously, we want to find out about your work, the work you're doing, the work you want to do, why you want to go there, but we're very interested in finding about you. Fulbright is very much about developing people. Spend some time thinking about your project statement. It should make sense. It should make sense to you first, and therefore you can explain it to reviewers and potentially interviewers as well. Just explain why you need to go and what the work is that you're going to do and why it makes sense for you to do this work. Have 3 recommenders. I have some your transcripts of your academic work and a passport copy. So again, all this information will be available to you, particularly as you express an interest and as the worlds open up. But I think really the parts you could start to focus on now are really the personal statement and project statement. If you're an artist, then just some samples of your work. Now, so at a scholar level, we tend to look for letters of affiliation, some indication that where you want to go, you will be accepted at that. Not necessarily immediately at application, but certainly for review and interview stages, we would certainly need to know where it is you want to go. Know your study or research objectives. The rationale for going to the USA is a very big one. You know, why couldn't this work be done in Ireland or Germany or another country that potentially has the same capabilities? So why there? Why work with these people? What resources do you need there? Why this course? So why does it really fit for you? Not just that it's a name I know well, but maybe some proof that you've really considered why this is the best fit for you above and beyond anywhere else that you need to go. And I mentioned just explaining the research question as well. And the impact, again, we're very interested in people, so we're interested in the impact it'll have on you, and then the impact you will have on the area that you're passionate about. So please do talk about that. You know, talk about the impact, personal impact, and the impact that that will have on the area that you're working on, how you might be the person who can push that forward. Your personal statement, it is very much about you personally. Tell us about you. You know, your personal, professional ambitions, your motivations, your interests. You know, we do want to know as well how you will use being a Fulbrighter, because it's a well-known badge, and it can open doors for you, and it connects you to a global network. You know, and it gives some gravitas, I think, to some of the work you're going to do. So how will you use that? You know, how will you best use that? And again, that hint down there in the Fulbright program, we really invest in people. That's where we're first of all coming at. And then we invest in what you're passionate about, the work you want to do, where you're going to go. To very much so represent, welcome candidates from underrepresented applications in different communities, areas of research, geographical areas, ethnicities. Again, coming back to, it's very much about the people. So again, tell us about you, what makes you interesting, what makes you driven, what makes you passionate, what your interests are. These are things we very much want to know. It's not just about tell us what you want to do. And really, everything shouldn't be answered through the prism of the work that you're interested in. It's very much about you and where that work may take you. Understand who you want to work with, where you want to go. Is it you want to go to an Irish enclave in Boston College, sorry, not necessarily Boston College, but Boston or New York or Chicago, well known, or do you want to go? I mentioned Oklahoma City; it's a very interesting one for me. Do you want to go to Arizona State, Texas? It's a big country, so there are many places you could go. Consider where you want to go, and again, it should make sense for you. And it should make sense to you first. I mentioned earlier the Creative Ireland Museum Fellowships in the Harry Ransom Centre or the Exploratorium or Smithsonian. You can't apply to all three. I have to say this award I think is a really interesting one. If I was eligible, I'd probably consider applying for this one. But please look at the flyers to get the specifics of the eligibility. We won't crowd the screen here, and you must seek a letter of support from the host because they have. Very often it's associated with programs that they already have going, so you must fit into that program as well. But these are really interesting ones, and I would encourage you to consider these. If you're interested in LLM, I'm not sure anybody is, but we have these guaranteed for full and partial tuition waivers with the listed colleges there. If you want to go to other universities, we would say please consider asking them as well what fee waivers they might provide, because it can be very expensive to do an LLM in the USA, and we would not have the supports to fully fund that either. So we would say that have your potential fee waivers and other sources of funding very much understood, at the time of application. There are other associate awards as well that where we be guaranteed some fee waivers and additional supports from the host institution doing your a master's or PhD there. So if these are areas of interest, I would ask you to consider looking at the programs in greater detail. Just in terms of, if you do apply, this is kind of important, I guess, because I've discussed maybe how you should, the things to focus on and where you need to position it. At the review, I suppose we have probably a greater initial look at the academic record and project statement. This is really to understand, does it hold water? Is it interesting? Does it make sense at a technical and academic level? There is then the other aspects of where I've asked before about how you will engage, how you make use of this, who you are, how you might be a leader now or a future leader. These are all parts to incorporate into your Fulbright statement and your personal statement. If you then get called to interview, it really flips on its head in the sense that you'll be asked again to discuss the academic aspects and the work you want to do, but really in a kind of a non-expert way. Then it comes down to very much about you as a person and your cultural engagement and leadership, how you will use this opportunity and how you'll engage in the US and what you'll do when you come back to Ireland and where you go from there. So again, very much about you. If you've applied for other grants, it's probably quite different than many of the grants you might have applied for before. So I mentioned the EU Schumann Awards. Again, I'm not going to go in major detail here because I think there is a lot of information there. I'm sorry, we've probably there's quite a lot of information here. So I just wanted to stop at this point and call in Anne if she wants to talk about her time as an alumni and her time in the US.
Thanks. Thanks, Dara. So I think you need to stop. Yeah, I'll see if I can share my screen. Okay, I think that's okay, is it? Everyone see it?
Yep, that's perfect.
Super. Okay, I'm going to leave it just at that, because sometimes when you go to full screen, it does funny things. At least for me, it does. Okay, look, first of all, my name is Anne. I'm very, very pleased to be here today with Joe and Dara and Paula and the team. What I'm going to take you through is just my personal perspective of Fulbright, but I hope that what I have to say will underpin many of the things that Dara has said. So I'll be touching on those, but perhaps from the perspective of somebody who has applied and has received a Fulbright scholarship and has continued my association with what I would call a very strong community of practice and group of friends. So moving on, first of all, this is me. I don't know if you can see all of those pictures. Some of them are a mix mash of what happened when I was actually in the States. I'll see if I can do the full screen. No, it won't do it. Yeah, it is. Great. So it's a mix mash of me in the States, and right in the very center, you can see two very important people to my success. One is Jimmy O'Brien Moran, who is a part-time lecturer in the School of Humanities, who was one of the first people to get a Fulbright scholar and was very supportive of me in applying for it. And he was also president of the Irish Fulbright Alumni Association. And then towards the end, there's a lady in a blue top. That's Kathleen King. And I went to USF to work with Kathleen King on an area called transformative learning. So at the moment, 7-8 years down the road, I'm senior lecturer. I have an RSA fellowship and research fellowship with TCD and with 1 or 2 other universities. I work in the School of Education and Lifelong Learning. And my focal area in terms of my research is very much on the development of faculty and teachers, both in further education and higher education, and also how people collaborate and work together in research partnerships. So it's really spark scholarly partnerships and research collaborations. So moving on then to the next slide, what I wanted to talk about is how you get it, because I think that's what a lot of people want to know. How do you actually succeed? Education is a life changer. In my view, it offers huge opportunities and freedom. And a lot of the people that I work with would be coming from extraordinarily disadvantaged backgrounds and may not have had the opportunity to go to 3rd level first time round. So the focal area for my research was looking at about 8 or 9 years ago, the Irish government, working with the Teaching Council in Ireland, decided that FE teachers were now required to have a professional qualification, which threw the whole sector into a kind of chaos, because people were coming from one type of occupation or professional identity, and they were moving in further education, and they were now required to be professionally trained as teachers. So I went to USF in Florida to work with a woman called Kathleen King, who was one of the world leaders in transformative learning. And one thing I would say to you right now is you need to wise up and be very focused. You need to be really, really focused on, are you on the right road to where you want to get to? In my case, I thought I was on the right road, going to the right place at the right time, making the right move, and I had the right line. When I got there, it was different to what I had expected, but it was still a rich experience. The other part of my application was to go to the University of Georgia in Athens. And I went there specifically to look at their unique doctoral program in education and leadership, which was based on action research. Those 2 colleges, or those 2 universities, colleges of education, have been instrumental in the development of my personal and professional life. I have lifelong friends from people who were Fulbrights, American Fulbrights who left America to go out into the world on their award, and also other people who were there who I met. One of them is a very good colleague and research collaborator and friend, Johanna Lassanen, who was a professor in USF and has now gone back to Jyväskylä. I now know how to spell Jyväskylä in Finland. So my first challenge to you is think really, really carefully about exactly what you are aiming for, and be sure that you're aimed in the right direction for where you want to go and what you want to achieve, both personally and professionally. Second thing I'd like to say is, and I'm using a prism here because Dara has covered very, very well the complex nature of a Fulbright Scholar Award. It's not just like the Irish Research Council or like a Marie Curie reward, where you win or you fail or you succeed or you don't based on the quality of the research proposal. And I would say it's a complex proposal. You have to have a very, very good research project, a very, very good research proposal, but you also have to pay very, very close attention to yourself and to why you want to go and meet the criteria for what I have to say, in fairness, the Commission, both in the US and in Ireland and elsewhere, are very strong on. There are certain attributes or qualities that I would see as a Fulbrighter. And the more Fulbrighters I meet over the years, the more and more it becomes evident that they have this unique capacity. I'm not saying it's unique to Fulbrighters, but it's certainly, you notice it. It's a generosity of spirit. It's an openness, it's a sense of fun, but also people who are very agile in themselves. They are able to stand on their own. They're able to be alone, and they're able to forge ahead and create relationships. And they can be high introverts and still do that. They're not all extroverts. And this brings me to one point. I had a Zoom call last night with someone who's become a very dear friend, research partner, and colleague. I met her in 2014. She's an American and she wanted to apply for an American Fulbright and come to Waterford. She didn't get her application that time round. I went, and since then we've worked together on research on Fulbright scholars, on the experience. And she's now in St. Kitts. Wouldn't you like that, in the Caribbean? She's there in the sunshine until May, doing a fabulous piece of research and collaboration with a college that's there, trying to open up degree programs to the local kids, because if you're very, very wealthy in St. Kitts, you get to go to America or you get to go to the UK to do your degree. But the majority of the population don't have a local university that they can go to locally. So I would say, similar to what Dara has said, that the kind of things that Fulbrighters do and that Fulbright supports and encourages are life-changing from a social, political, as well as an economic and a technological perspective. And that's what makes the awards so very, very unusual and unique across the bandwidth of the disciplines, across the range of the subjects and the focal areas, from humanities to science to technology to language. It's just phenomenal. So moving on, this is the impact, some of the impacts that I've experienced having got a Fulbright. In the first instance, I have been successful with 4 fully funded PhD scholarships in our School of Education, 2 Scotons, 1 Irish Research Council, a national forum, and of course the Fulbright grant. Now, if any of you are in humanities or social science, you know how hard it is to get funding. It's grand when you're on the STEM side, but when you're on the other side, you're constantly climbing the wall and trying to grab a bit from the other side in order to pursue the research. Bit of bias there, Dara, terribly sorry. Anyway, the scholarships in terms of other things that have come to me as a result of the Fulbright are my RSA fellowship, visiting professorships, research fellowships, and I was dragged by Jimmy into the IFAA and have met some incredible individuals. Sarah, who set the association up with Paul and 1 or 2 others, and then other people along the way who have helped me in my career, both in advising and mentoring me and in coaching me. And I have to say that the Fulbright Alumni Association works very, very closely with the Commission, and they are fantastic in terms of what they do for everyone. Couldn't speak more highly about the support, about the openness, about the generosity of the team that work there. They are just A1. Moving on then, in terms of what actually happened, my intention to go to USF was to work with Kathleen King to further develop and enhance those teacher education programs. That was okay. It worked out reasonably well. It didn't quite go the way I wanted it to. But then, you know, since then I've seen that I've moved into identity and other areas that I didn't anticipate I was going to at the time. The other one, in terms of UGA, in terms of pedagogical practices, I always remember one professor when I was doing my research and they were creating a doctoral program based on action research. And I remember saying to him, you know, how's that going? And he said, it's like trying to nail Jello to the wall. Every time you have it, it slides off again. So I laughed at that. Unexpected are the projects that have emerged. One of them is the Spark Scholarly Partnerships and Research Collaborations, which is focused on Fulbright scholars. It's focused on the experience of Fulbright scholars, both American and European, as they go and take up that award. Second one is also on the engagement of faculty in higher education in collaborating, because what I learned from the Fulbright is quite interesting, and nobody had ever told it to me before, is that your success is as much determined by the network and the nodes and the partnerships that you create as it is by you slaving away till 3 o'clock in the morning writing a paper. And that's a very, very keen lesson. So moving on in terms of tips for the application, I don't think I'm going to contradict Dara. I think actually I'm going to reinforce a lot of what he said, but from a very organic and experienced side of the fence rather than deep knowledge. All I can tell you is my experience. First of all, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. In other words, be focused. And Dara has said that. Don't just pick a name out of the hat, make a connection, be very, very clear about what you want to do, where you want to go, and who you want to work with. And from my point of view, in terms of your career and your professional development and who and what you are, look for the through line or the white line in the middle of your professional life and your personal life. And think 5-10 years from now, where do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? And aim for that. And if you got that sorted, then you're good to go. You're good to complete the application as Dara has set out. Finally, the other points I would say, and I think these really push to what Dara has been saying. There's a 5 Ps. I won't complete some of them. I'll leave you to fill in the gap, but prior planning prevents something poor performance. You can work out what that P is. So planning and preparation. And the year that I got my Fulbright, what Dara might not know is that I had completed 5 other applications to Marie Curie, to the Irish Research Council, to a range of organizations looking for funding. And the proposal that I submitted to the Fulbright had the benefit of what I would call gifts of feedback from those institutions. And one of the significant characteristics of a Fulbrighter, I think, is to get up and go on again. You dust yourself down and you pick yourself up and you keep on going. And it's amazing, the harder you work, the luckier you get. Okay, second one is being very focused, which I've talked about. Check and double check. You know, and I know that now from my work with doctoral students, and in the school, we've developed a significant doctoral program. And we have actually, our school was the first one to bring 2 American Fulbrighters to Ireland. As a result of my award, we brought Jennifer Schneider from USF and Meg Benk from New York. And I have to say, those 2 US Fulbrights to Waterford have made a significant difference, particularly Jennifer, particularly Meg, in terms of technology enhanced learning and where we're going with the technology university. And it's good that our school was the first one to do that. And it's nice that I was the first female academic to get the Fulbright. Kind of like that one myself. But also listen, look, and be aware around you when you're there, if you get the award. And also, I'm going back to my USF experience here. You need to be able to think on your feet. So if things are not working out the way you expect them to be, you need to learn what to hold on to and what to let go and move with the flow. I would not have established research in scholarly partnerships and research collaborations if I had not known to let go of where I was focused and focus on something else. And as a result of that, I was able to make connections into Duke and into Auburn. I was in the South. That was an experience. There's so many places you want to go to in the US. I would have really loved to have gone to California. I would have loved to have gone to New York. I would have loved to have gone to loads of places, but the South was where I went. And I nearly think the South is a different country to the North, but I'd be shot for saying that if I was in the States, or maybe I wouldn't. The other one is to tattoo on the inside of your eyelids that when you are working with Americans, there is, I don't know whether I should probably say this, but sure, I've started now. Be very clear about what is in it for you and what is in it for them, because you can be sure that the WIIFM operates very much in a culture that's focused on the individual. So, you know, if somebody says they're reaching out to you, it probably means that they're looking for you to help them. And before you catch that hand, them think about what they can do for you as well, because they'll expect it. It's a two-way street. Take the time to prepare and learn how to negotiate and manage the balance between the research and your life and enjoying your time there. And this may help some of you doing the applications. There are 2 publications there that have come out in the last couple of years from my own Fulbright experience. And we have a 3rd one coming from Duke and from USF. But there's also another to that journal, which has a whole series of articles on internationally mobile academics and Fulbrights. So that might help you, you know, to get a sense of what the thing is about. And then finally, 3 life lessons. First one is to stay focused on what you're good at. And that comes out of the Fulbright studies. All of the Fulbrighters, the European ones, the US ones, the ones who came from Australia to the States, the Canadians, every single one in a different way. That's the message that came out of our research. Secondly, from a professor in Duke, this is about life balance. He talked about an academic hat trick, which I had never heard before. And he said at 40, he had got tenure, a divorce, and a heart attack. And he had brought huge money into Duke. And they said, Fulbright, he said Fulbright wasn't on their radar. And he was in bioengineering. And his story is incredible. It's in the published, it'll be in the next published paper. But his story is incredible in his view of how much Fulbright added to him personally and professionally after achieving what you might say is a very high-flying academic career in Duke. And the final one is from prior to my Fulbright, I worked in Denmark in Copenhagen Business School, and a Danish professor who was about to retire, I asked him what was the secret of a successful career in academia. And he looked at me and he just smiled and he said, it's very simple, Anne. Cool head, warm heart, and clean hands. So if you keep that in mind, you won't go far wrong. So that's all I have to say. Joe will have the slides and the information, and I'm absolutely available to anyone in WIT. And all I can say is that if I didn't work in WIT, I would never have received the encouragement and the support to both go for the Fulbright and also to bring those Fulbrighters to our institution. And finally, I'd have to thank Joe in the RSU and Mark and the team there. But most importantly, Dara, I have to thank you guys in the commission, because Sonia and everyone, you know, you are our lifeline when we are in the States. We know we can call you, and we can call you for the most crazy and the most serious things. And it's a huge comfort to know you're there. We mightn't always call you, you know, when we have a puncture in the middle of a road that seems to go on for nowhere in the deep south, but knowing you're there somewhere does really help. So thank you all very much.
I'm just going to take back final control to present just a final couple of slides and then wrap up. And if anybody has any questions they wanted to either type in or ask in. So bear with me 1 second. I think I'm on screen 2. Okay. So look, I don't need to go on too much longer, really. This is more just of a pointer for anybody on the call who might represent the university or their department in some way. But it's a two-way street, and great collaborations come from this, but there's an opportunity to bring in students. And students do apply to WIT and other institutions themselves on an ad hoc basis, as do scholars. So you can host them either with a specific award or where they just apply for the all disciplines to WIT. I would recommend, you know, it's a bit of an open door, because for most US academics, it's on their bucket list of doing a Fulbright at some stage. So if you want to encourage academics, US academics to come to your institution, Fulbright is a good way of doing that. The Specialist Award is it's an institutional level award where the institution can actually say that they want to host a specialist in a very specific area, and they can work with us and work at a roster to see who could be available. US Global Scholar Awards is very much driven from the US, but again, there's nothing to stop WIT of announcing that they would be interested in global scholars coming and working with them. The Fulbright US Awards, obviously, that's where academics from the US then are coming to do at a human level. So again, if you have US contacts or if you want to generate US contacts, Fulbright can be a great bridge for that. So you can develop some very interesting pathways and great relationships going forward. Okay. So I just mentioned the comment there, but we will be sending out information to over a period just to advise them that the specialist awards, for instance, are open. But if it's something you want to think about already, please go onto our website or certainly contact us to find out more information on that. We do have a number of specialised student and scholar awards coming to Ireland, as well as the all disciplines. And all disciplines, really, we never know what we're going to get, but then we have other areas that are a little bit more defined. At this time, we have worked with WIT, and we're quite willing to and interested in working with them again for hosting US scholars as students. And again, we do a partner request anyway in October to December, so we'll be reaching out to institutions and saying, would you like that? Would you like to be involved in Fulbright to bring Americans colleagues to Ireland? So what your next steps might be, despite and including all of the information we've provided today and the website and information that's available, but the next steps really are to consider what you might want to do. Going back to this idea, it should make sense to you. That's really first. I would say talk to a Fulbrighter is a great way of shortcutting some of your thinking and machinations. Obviously, you can post on social media. You can contact us for queries. You can go to our website and have a look. And if you've gone through all of this and you still have a very specific question, sometimes people do have those little, slightly off the beaten track questions. By all means, contact them, contact the commission as well, just to throw it up there. I would genuinely recommend people to apply. As I said, really the biggest cost to you is your time, but there are so many learnings you can get from it. We do get to the position where sometimes people don't get a Fulbright award, but actually because they picked up the phone or they sent an email, they made contact in the US, it was like pushing an open door. So in the US, they understand how difficult it is to get a Fulbright. They consider that getting a Fulbright to Ireland is one of the biggest accomplishments. It's probably tougher to get from the US to Ireland than it is from Ireland to the US. So they understand if you get it or you don't get it, that's somewhat secondary, but they'll know where you're coming from, what you're trying to do, and they're very welcoming of that. So it's a great opportunity just to reach out to colleagues and plan for success, and if you don't get it the first time, you can apply again. I mean, we do have people who've been repeat applicants and have got through. I've heard, I'm not sure, it's certainly people in the States of having applied 11 times getting through. So that's definitely commitment. But certainly in Ireland, I think, you learn a lot from your application. And if you have to go again, you can learn from that and apply again. And we're very welcoming of repeat applicants, because from our mind, it proves that they considered that they really want to do this. They consider what they might need to do, focus down on a little bit more, and consider, and maybe it's a better time in their career or their life pathway to now do it, and that shows through as well in their application. But certainly talking to a Fulbright, I think, is a long way to go, and don't be afraid to talk about yourself on all aspects of yourself. We really don't want to talk to you through the prism of the work you're doing. We want to hear about the work you want to do, but we want to talk to you as a person. I think that's genuinely the biggest hint and piece of information I can give you, is that we're very interested in you as a person, and what that comes through. It's not always the classical definition of an academic. In fact, far from it. We're very much interested in people who have interesting things to say and passions. So bring your passion, bring you to your application. It's quite unusual. It's not something we typically do. I'm from kind of business and science space myself, and this is not something we would have done prior to that in any applications I would put through. So it is a little bit more thought-provoking to think about yourself, but it's inherently worth doing that. You gain a lot from that whole process, and we're here to help you along. And people like Anne are here to absolutely help you along. Thank you very much for your support as a campus ambassador as well. You're the kind of the eyes and ears and voice of Fulbright in Waterford as well, and look forward to working with you in more detail as president of the Alumni Association as well. So these are all good things. Thank you. Joe, I don't know whether you have anything you want to finish on.
Did you say Joe? Sorry.
I did, Joe, yeah.
I wasn't sure whether you said no. I often get sorry. No,
You're on, Joe.
Just to thank everyone for joining. I know there was a few that wanted to be here and couldn't, so I'm going to send the recording that we've done here today as well. I often get a lot of questions around the right timing. So just especially from the postgraduate community, they're in the middle of their project and they're wondering, you know, sometimes they might come to it too late and they haven't enough time remaining on their PhD program. So just to give an indication of the eligibility and the timing, and for the next call that's coming up, Dara, if you could, like just in terms of the, you know, when it's going to launch and when they need to be considering, and then when they might actually get to the US if they're successful. So just that timeline again would be helpful.
Well, as a student, it should be before they've kind of written up and done their Viva going. So at some point they will pass on through to being a scholar. So a little bit before that. But again, it should make sense, you know, to some extent, if they're going to finish their PhD before they go to the States, well, then the rationale for the PhD and their study then disappears because they've done that work. So really, they're thinking about their future rationale as a scholar. So maybe consider themselves at the scholar level. And again, you don't have to be, you know, an emeritus or tenured academic on a long path. You can be a scholar who's just starting off. You know, we are interested in the diversity across that board as well. And say the NUI Scholar Award is very specifically for that. You know? So
if I could come in there, Dara, that's a really important point, because one of our most successful scholars, John Nolan, went immediately after he did his Viva, and he is a phenomenal ambassador for Fulbright as well as WIT. And one of his team, I think one of the women on his team has just finished her PhD, and they have data that they've never been able to work on properly in terms of reducing the impact through nutrition of Alzheimer's. And she's going off in a postdoc capacity for a year. So the range and opportunities they're super, absolutely super.
And the key point in all that is just, it should make sense for you personally. It should make sense for your work as well. And, you know, it can be this year, but it can be another year as well. There's nothing to stop you thinking about the process now and then ultimately deciding it's not exactly the right time to go. I suspect actually there will be a lot of interest in people going, despite the pandemic, there has been a lot of interest in the cohort in the program that had closed for applications last November. There were still an awful lot of people interested in going, seeing the world opening up again. So I would suspect maybe we're getting into a roaring early 20s type of scenario, but I think there will be a lot more people interested in going abroad and maybe not just doing the same thing over and over again, but broadening their horizons as well. And something like Fulbright is, and I do say like Fulbright, it doesn't have to be Fulbright, but something like that can be positive in your career, but it can be very rejuvenating as well. We would tend to get a lot of US academics who come, who, you know, to some extent it's such a pressure environment at the times that they're afraid that at their early stage, if they step off the path, that they'll be mowed down. So it is this, you know, for some of them, it's a certain point at which they have security in their career that they come and they do a Fulbright in Ireland. And what they get most out of is not necessarily the work they came to do, but it's the sense of being able to breathe and think and create networks and think about what they want to do academically and personally. It's very positive. And a lot of Irish, probably scholars even more than students, get that as well. It's an opportunity to really think a little bit.
Yeah, Dara, if I could just come in there just to reinforce that point, two very simple points. The first one is in relation to what you're saying about rejuvenating your career. That individual I interviewed in Duke, he went to, I better not say the country, but he went from a very privileged, very pressurized higher education institution in the States. And the institution he went to was very academically sound, but there were a lot of riots, a lot of political unrest. And there was a riot on the campus one day, and he was debating whether he would go into class or not because he had set an exam. And I cannot explain to you the surprise that he had the day he spoke to me, that he walked across a campus full of riots and he went into the class and he had a class of students sitting quietly waiting for him to do the exam. And that he said that single incident changed his life when he compared it to the students that he might have been dealing with in the States. And the other point that I would make, Dara, is that the right time is the right time. There's not a wrong time. Even if you apply once, if you really want it, you'll apply again. But I have to say, from my own research and from what I've read, Fulbright is unique. There's nothing like it out there. It is absolutely unique in terms of its philosophy, its ontology, what it requires of you. And as I said to you, both the Commission and the people who work in the Commission and the Fulbright community of practice, they are a very different and a very open and a very generous group of people. So if you want to, you can pick up phone or email or tweet anyone, either in the Commission, in the alumni, or people in Waterford. Everyone will help you.
Joe, have you any other questions, or was that it?
So Dara, there was just a question that came in. I know you've touched on it briefly, but speaking to someone who may have applied before and are thinking of applying again, what would just maybe a couple of points, high level things, some tips for a person thinking of applying again?
I think it's a robust application. So it's consider all of the parts. Consider that you put effort into all of the parts of the application. Consider as well that sometimes, certainly at an interview stage, sometimes the panel will struggle to get to the person because all of the answers are all through the prism of the work. But actually what the panel were trying to find out about was you as a person and your passions. I do sometimes say to people, particularly when we used to meet people, really meet people, but I'd say to them, you know, if you're a world-class tiddlywinks player, tell us about that. You know, that's how we can get to understand you and your passions and where you're going. It's not just that you're going to go into a lab and do 6 months work and then look up and that's a job done. Because it's not that. If that's the type of word you're applying for, it's not really, Fulbright's not for you at this time. So I think the best I can say is that do look across the board, do consider yourself as the person in this, do consider the impacts of what you're doing as well, not just the academic and technical perfection of what you're doing, but in terms of let the panel and the interviewers and the reviewers and the Commission and the board all understand who you are.
Yeah, and we just had another question in there in the chat. Just any general advice or tips on identifying networking opportunities to reach out to US host institutions? So this will be it.
Typically, it's an open door in the sense that they do understand what Fulbright is. So I think it's reach out and say, look, I'm thinking of applying for Fulbright, but I would, and that it would, the reason why I would like to come there is because, say, this person is working there, or you have this resource, or, it's the right time. It's the right time in your life. So it's, again, what makes sense to you will make to other people, but to a big extent, people will understand what Fulbright is about in the States. They might necessarily know where Waterford Institute of Technology is, or UCD, or Trinity, or Galway, NUIG. They don't necessarily know these things, bearing in mind that they're dealing with thousands of institutions. But they do know what Fulbright means something because they're allowed to apply for it as well. So I think from that point of view is just explain to them upfront that you're looking to apply for a Fulbright award and you would like to work with them, and explain what that might be then.
Also, Dara, if I could come in there, a lot of the universities have an international section, and within that international section, they'll have people who both help their own faculty and own people to apply for Fulbrights, but also handle Fulbrights coming in. So that's one thing to just look for the international section, or they'll call it a global center or whatever it is. The other thing is to look for the profiles of Fulbrighters, either through the commission or through the alumni. And each of the states and each of the counties in the many counties in the states have Fulbright alumni associations. So it's just a simple matter of Googling the Fulbright Alumni Association, for example, in Tampa, and you'll find a large number of people who have received Fulbright, and they're a strong network as well. So just, and the CIES, I suppose, as well, Dara.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you will probably less through them because they tend to be more organized for US coming to Ireland. But I mean, you might get a view from them of where to go. But I think really what I've said and what you said covers the two ends of the spectrum. One, you might understand the research, or you might know the researchers in your area or the course that you want to do. If it's the course you want to do, you know, then it's there are some very good websites. I think we talked about Peterson's. It's a good website which talks about different courses in the States, but you're probably at a postgraduate level. But beyond that, I think, you know, understand what it is you want to do. That tends to open up where you should go and who you should go with. And I think just talking about the Fulbright aspect of it it's a good. It's not a cold call. It's something they understand immediately where you come.
As with the other thing we used to say in other years, I don't know if it still holds true, Dara, is that you might think at first you want to go to an Ivy League college, but you might have better success with, you know, a regional college or a regional university or somewhere else. It doesn't have to be the, you know, the Harvard or whatever. The experience can be equally rich in some of the other universities, and you might have a better chance if you're going, you know.
Well, sometimes the experience can certainly be richer as well. I mean, we do deal with institutions in the States who are not necessarily Ivy League, you know, and they do make the comments. They say, come to Bloomington, Indiana, you know, and be a rock star, be an Irish Fulbrighter and a rock star. You know, you're an unusual beast in that. So that's the thing. And also, I mean, there's so many really, really good universities around the States that don't necessarily all have huge marketing budgets. That's partially an aspect of it as well. So it should make sense. If it doesn't make sense for you to go to Ivy League, then explain that. Why? But be prepared to explain that. So I think I'll leave it at that then. So we've gone past our time. Joe, thanks very much to yourself and WIT for hosting this. As I said, it's our first of this season, so good place to start. And thank you very much for your input as well.
Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.